So here's our cake. Cookies and cream topping. Amazing. Cut into it. This is 10 out of 10.
This is a zero-carb protein bread. It is so light and airy, it almost feels like a pound cake, and it's super easy to make. First, cook some ground chicken, let it cool, then add it to the blender with 6 eggs, baking powder, baking soda, and seasoning of choice. Blend that all up and then transfer to a loaf pan. Bake in the oven for about 30 minutes at 400 degrees or until golden on top. Let it cool in the oven.
Walk into any grocery store today. Think about this. If it feels like everything in the grocery store has protein in it, think about if you've seen any food labels that have protein on the label. Protein chips, protein bread, protein cereal. We've even found protein water, believe it or not. It's like everything needs to have protein slapped on the label, and if it does, it must be healthier. Well, here's the question. How much do you actually need? And do all these products deliver on their promises, or is it just expensive marketing tactics? We're going to unpack this in our episode today. We're going to talk about protein obsession in the current state of nutrition, things at the grocery store, supplements, any markets or stores that sell food products. It's all over the place. So we're going to start by going into what we're seeing on the shelves, talk about products that make sense, and we're going to talk a little bit about the science. What do you actually need when it comes to protein? Which products have merit? And unsurprisingly, a spoiler, it's not as complicated as what you may think. So hopefully you can walk away from this conversation and walk through the grocery aisles or the store aisles with a little bit more confidence and know which things you should grab, which things maybe just for fun, what you should look for on the labels, maybe which things to maybe not waste your money on, who knows. So we're back with Matthew and Laura. We got all three dietitians here to talk about protein. I mean, protein is a very important macronutrient. But why don't we start? Who wants to take the first one? Let's go into what we're seeing in the protein aisle. So we understand protein, the macronutrient protein foods. What are we seeing out there? What shows up?
I can take a little dipping of my toes into it because there's a couple of protein products that I feel like I chat about a lot with my clients. Some of them for good reasons, some of them maybe you don't need to waste your time on, but some of the I guess like whole foods options that we're going for um, would be things like your Greek yogurt or lots of like dairy based products. Those are ones that, with my clients, anyways, that we can focus on sometimes to get a good dose of protein in. Um, there are some higher protein milks out there on the market nowadays. Um, a little bit more processing, not that that's too much of an issue when we really look at it, but looking at really filtration process that adds protein to regular cow's milk and things like that. So kind of on the dairy side, there's lots of those. Then we get into a little bit more of the protein snacks and like you mentioned, Brand, the chips and cookies, bars, shakes, and even waters and things like that. Where it's kind of just taking something you might find in those middle grocery aisles and slapping protein into it, which, we'll talk about a little bit today about why that might be good in certain cases, why that might just be totally not needed in others, and all of that stuff. But yeah, I would say there's some good ones out there, the dairy products, and then yeah, I'm seeing some things like protein chips. That's a big one that I've seen that are like, I don't know, $10 a bag or something like that, and it's like a little like 25-gram bag. Um, so yeah, those are the ones that I might not recommend usually. But yeah, what have you guys heard of too?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of the ones you've seen. I've also seen. I tend to find the ones that pop up in my mind a lot are in the aisles or the areas where there are a lot of like grain based foods or things that have maybe more sugar in them, which traditionally have kind of been more demonized for a variety of reasons. They're too high carb, whatever else. Like there's protein breads, there's protein cereals with more protein in them. Don't get me started on cereals that have more protein, but it's actually just, we say we got 14 grams in a serving with milk. Like, don't even get me going on that. And then like popcorn, pancakes, uh, there is merit to some of these things. I think we'll get into that in a bit, but it definitely pops out in those areas. Perhaps that's where I spend a lot of my time in the grocery store. But Matthew, you pointed out some ones earlier to us when we were preparing for this episode that were interesting. Tell us about what you found.
A lot of similar ones to what's been mentioned already, but I agree that a large focus has been higher grain foods and trying to make those more high protein. So things like high protein popcorn, high protein cereal, high protein pancakes. Some more, I guess, recent ones we could talk about are things like higher protein coffee, high protein coffee cold foam, things like that. So more, I'd say more diverse array of drinks now that are high protein. It's not just protein shakes anymore. It's protein water for some reason, protein coffee. Just, yeah, it's all over the place now, but largely I'd say grains, liquids, high protein desserts like cookies and stuff, high protein chips, high protein bread, high protein juice, high protein pasta, just about everything.
Sprinkle protein into it and call her good, I guess. Episode done. Call her good. Just protein and good. uh, from your two perspectives, why such a big deal? Why is this used so much as marketing hooks for people? What's the drive? Why do food manufacturers, I guess also beverage manufacturers, do this to begin with?
Yeah, I think a lot of it can be based in some very real things. Like we know that protein can really help with like satiety at meals. If you have a good dose of protein at each meal, that can keep us nice and full and satiated for potentially longer. Um, and then that's when all things get taken out of hand, I feel, and they're like really emphasized for kind of like weight loss, fitness culture types of things, really focusing on weight because that is just where our culture and society always looks towards. Um, so, yeah, it's based in some things like, yes, absolutely, it can be very satiating, similar to things like dietary fiber that keep you fuller for a nice long time. But yeah, gets a little bit taken away with when we look at social media trends and things like that, where there's no end and no maximum to how much protein you can get. Um, and yeah, I think it's taken a little bit out of hand now.
Yeah, I'd say it's quite similar to how, with something like fiber, that's one that for a time and still to an extent currently was more emphasized on social media. People recognizing that this has important functions in the body, it's important for our health. But I think that this has gone several levels further. And now we have found protein just getting into every single food, regardless of if it makes sense or if, yeah, making it seem like every single thing we eat needs to have a bunch of protein in it, and that protein is just the one and only and like the most important thing in our diets, to an extent at the expense of other parts of our diet, which we'll talk about there, why the something can be important without it needing to displace or take the balance out of other parts of our diet.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, it's actually it's very different to what I feel like I'm used to. I feel like in recent but earlier days, there was a lot of focus from my end, and maybe it's just kind of like the type of clients that I work with, where we are actually trying to get enough protein in. Like that's a very big emphasis that we place. And yeah, for example, like I work with people living with cancer, where they need a ton of protein. To prevent wasting and things like that. So that can translate to other groups for sure. Um, but to get to the place that we are today, people are really, really worried that they're getting enough protein because there might be some of those occasions, like even some of my clients living with cancer, they've heard that they've needed a ton of protein, but they're going way, way, way further than they need to, which I never thought was even really possible because in the past it's been uh, pretty hard for people to achieve this. Um, so it's just bringing it back into talk context too, because like you said, Matthew, it's we don't want it to be at the expense of other essential nutrients as well. So complicated thing that in the past seemed less complicated.
I agree. I agree. So when we're talking about a lot of these products, and I think it's to emphasize the point you mentioned, Laura, that context matters. Of course, depending on your situation, things that happen in food marketing, I feel like we saw this with gluten-free products that just exploded when gluten-free diets became more popular for reasons beyond celiac disease and non-celiac gluten sensitivities. It became, obviously a big trend that people with gluten that could not tolerate gluten or that should avoid gluten, people with celiac disease, it benefited them because there were more products available. So there is a subset of people that actually do benefit from this that otherwise, may have found it more challenging. But yeah, we're more talking about, of course, the ones that like are just kind of going overboard, like levels beyond that, like what Matthew mentioned, to the point where, and this is a particular bone to pick, where it affects cost and value because you have two products that are side by side that are nutritionally very similar, if not the exact same, with one exception being the protein content. And you throw protein in it, and we get to jack the price up because it's better. And I feel like a lot of the products that are available, like, don't always, the value for money doesn't always translate. Like if it's more expensive and I get more protein from it, yeah, I can argue convenience to get the protein, but at what level is it like I'll just have regular crackers with a different protein source? It's cheaper and it's not terribly more inconvenient for me to put that together.
Yeah, I think it's important that we recognize that not all of these products are a bad thing and that they do have their place. So, for example, if we're looking at a protein product for, let's just start with convenience. It's not inherently a bad thing that we want to make just getting in more food in general or more protein specifically, something that's more convenient. But then we need to look at if it's in a way that makes sense and if like you said, the cost for it actually makes sense and matches what we're getting. So we want to look at things like what does let's say, normal version of this product cost? What does the high protein variety cost? And then are there easier ways I could add protein to that product? If I, like you said, the crackers, could I maybe just have that with a different food that already has some protein? Or could I have a snack that otherwise has protein in a way that is similarly convenient, but maybe saving me from either higher costs or less good of a taste, where some of these products you can certainly tell that they haven't been added. And other products where, again, another example being like the high protein versus the regular version is like a 2 gram protein difference. Is like, did I really need to pay 1.5 times as much just for that? So I think that those are some of the starting places that we need to consider when we're looking at some of these products. And yeah, trying to maybe go back to basics as a start for filling in those gaps. Things like protein bars, protein shakes that you may already be familiar with what they taste like. They're less hyped or special, so they're coming with less of a premium when it comes to the price, or even just convenient whole foods options, which we can also discuss.
I don't have much to add on to that. But yeah, I mean, like when I am chatting with clients, it is kind of a good thing to get like little bits of protein throughout the day, right? And sometimes that might be through having a snack. Um, Normally what I kind of go over is okay, let's try pairing something like a protein food with a like a fruit or veggie, or if we're a little bit more active, going for a grain or a starch portion. So there is that balance in there, and yes, protein is included. It doesn't have to be anything crazy, right? So we're thinking of like a protein bar, which is nice, convenient. You're guaranteed to get a good dose of protein for sure. But sometimes they have like no added sugars, or they're literally just protein. And so might we be missing out on a grain or a starch or like a fruit and vegetable that we still want to add that in? And maybe even thinking of like a more cost effective method, because these protein bars can be expensive. Like we don't necessarily need the whole protein bar to get as much protein as we need through the day. So can we save a little bit of it or something like that? Just I like to be mindful of people's wallets for sure, because it's never fun to get a recommendation from a dietitian where it costs you like an arm and leg to add it into your routine. So yeah, working with convenience, but at the same time, like we don't need the protein bars. We can have maybe some like chopped up tofu. We can have a like small little Greek yogurt with some fruit or something as a balanced snack. Um, so it doesn't have to be anything crazy, but working with what works best for you, really.
Yeah, there's no clear indication aside from specific individuals that are having a tough time getting enough protein. Of course, this would be valuable, but it doesn't mean that your attention should leave other things like fiber, vitamin, mineral content, the energy that you need from the foods. I mean, if you're having straight up protein bar, Laura, like you described, and you don't pair it with anything, and then you may be your hunger may have been taken care of for a short period of time, but at the end of the day, you still don't have enough energy to do whatever you're needing to do. So it's just not going to be as effective. And that's a key thing I think is that, like many things, food marketing, it's so popular and it's like, oh, I should do this, that it becomes like if I do this, then everything will be better, which is a why just do way too much of a generalization to the point where, yeah, it'll be good for some people depending on the context. It could also just totally throw a bunch of people off because it's like protein, but look at the protein I'm eating. uh, why am I not, why don't I have any energy, why? And then now we're here, maybe.
I get that experience a lot, actually, is because I work with a lot of people dealing with IBS symptoms, and they're really trying to just better their diet in general, because it makes sense. Brain thinks that if we eat a better or healthier diet, all of our issues will be removed. But a lot of the times it's I get something like, oh, like I started having protein bars for all of my snacks, but my gut issues are way worse. And so that can be when like you want to choose the products wisely. Like, yes, we can include these things, and it's not that they're inherently bad by any means. But protein bars include lots of things like sugar alcohols or like gums, or sometimes they pump it with crazy amounts of certain types of fiber that can be fermented in the gut and cause horrendous symptoms for people with IBS. So it's looking at that for sure, right? That's an exact case where more protein does not always mean better for you specifically, because of sometimes the other things that come along with it that can be alleviated by just choosing maybe more a whole food option like chicken or smaller amounts of beans, tofu, all of that stuff. Um, yeah, because your guts will be hating you for some of these choices out on the market for sure.
And in addition to considering the extra things they may have that we may not want, like you said, the sugar alcohols and fibers and things like that, we also want to consider that some forms of these supplements, more specifically things like protein powders, are also going to be lacking some of the other things that maybe we do want more of. So, for example, other macronutrients, like we said, where if you pair a protein with a carbohydrate, that gives you a more full type of snack, but it also gives you more vitamins and minerals, more so the micronutrients. So, are we also maybe lacking in some vitamins or some minerals? Can we maybe have a whole food protein source that also has iron, if that's another concern that we have? Chances are that you may benefit from not just additional protein in your diet, but maybe a different nutrient at the same time. And food can be a much easier way to get that combination than just the protein itself. It's just the protein in isolation doesn't really have other vitamins and minerals when it comes to some of these options.
Before we get into the how much do you really need piece, is there any products that you've come across that have a particular use case that you're like, yeah, this is a product that is marketed as a high protein, or maybe it's a product that has like a good protein content that is kind of a sleeper that's not well known or not well marketed because it's just naturally has a lot of protein that you use a lot with clients, or that you recommend a lot for whatever use case.
I do have an answer. I kind of did mention it already, and this is looking at sometimes the higher protein milks out there, not only just because they have higher protein, um, and if you can tolerate dairy, they're usually lactose free, so that's one thing. But if you can tolerate dairy, this might be something for you if you need more protein. They also have higher calcium in them sometimes. So it's just nice if, which I hear is really common nowadays, is if you don't drink milk regularly, and you're not having like a ton of extra calcium sources in your diet, then that can be like a quick boost for that too, along with getting a good dose of protein. My experience tastes exactly the same as regular cow's milk. So yeah, for people who do drink dairy, that's awesome, and I bring that up a lot to clients because it's a little bit more of like kind of getting more bang for your buck in that sense. It's a little bit more expensive than regular cow's milk, but you're getting a bit more nutrients, like the protein from it. You can kind of adjust, like with regular milk, the percent fat based on your needs. But then, yeah, just looking at like general other whole food options out there that come along with that, like chicken, beets, eggs, tofu. Greek yogurt is maybe a more product type of idea that can be higher protein, nuts, lentils, things that aren't really branded very much. So it's not really a product as much in the sense of like the higher protein milks. Um, but yeah, I'm seeing some more things out there like um, Silk has a higher protein plant-based yogurt as well. I've seen, yeah, Bran, you have that in the fridge a couple times during the week. So yeah, I've gotten really good reviews of that. That's really tasty. So if dairy's not available to you, then there's other options out there too. So yeah, I guess that does count as a product for sure.
I agree. I did see something online of I can't remember the exact context, but this person was hating on ultra processed milks, like the high protein milks. They're like, where's the extra protein coming from? It doesn't say there's protein powder added to it. Like, why is it higher in protein? That doesn't make any sense. Are the food manufacturers, like, are they trying to deceive us? That it is just one extra step in the production of milk that concentrates the protein. And then also, where protein is found in milk, calcium is also found, like Laura mentioned, higher calcium content, which is a huge bonus. Um,
I was
oh,
gonna just cut in there. It's good
mhm.
to distinguish because you said ultra processed and it's actually ultra filtered.
Oh,
Because I think that's why people get scared of it because they see the word it's just in your brain, right? They see the word ultra and think ultra
yep,
processed and it maybe is something automatically bad, but it's just a processing technique that filters the milk, right? So
ultra
we're not
filtered.
lying to you. It's a thing.
Filtered. I was thinking
I think it's a
UHT, and
good
then I just
teaching
got
thing.
words crossed in my mind. Yeah,
Exactly.
totally. Yeah.
Happens to everyone.
Hmm.
Sorry to call you out. 'Cause that's something that I get a lot is clients will be like, "Oh, I'm not gonna drink that." Like, I grew up on a farm, like, I'm only drinking, like, whole milk or cow's milk. I'm like, "It is that."
It's one step, just like regular milk. We filter out the fat and then they put it back together or reconstitute it in 1% milk or 2% milk or 3.25% milk. But in this case, it's more so just adding in more of that protein, less of the other things. It's very similar process, just a little, again, like an additional step there that doesn't change a ton other than the protein content. It's not milk from like a different cow or like processed in a special unhealthy way. It's literally just adding more of the protein back, similar to how we add more of the fat back or fat in regular milk processing.
Doesn't ultra filtered milk, because of how it's filtered and processed, actually last longer on the shelf too? Like it's a longer shelf life.
Well, people also think that's bad though.
Well, can't win them all, I guess. Yeah, less likely to go to spoil and sour. Like I think. Okay, before we get into the next piece, Matthew, any products that you come across, either ones that we've already mentioned or others that you feel like are like actually have merit?
Same ones that Laura mentioned, things like the ultra filtered milks, things like Greek yogurt, things like, yeah, more in that side of things that are going to taste pretty much the same. We're not doing anything that's ridiculous to add it back. It doesn't have a weird texture to it, and it's convenient and a whole food option. Also, a lot less expensive than some of these other high protein or extra protein foods. So I don't have any additional ones there.
I will add a piece on plant protein options. The explosion of high protein foods in the market has definitely allowed for more options, more choices to allow you to choose ones that don't taste like chalk. That's a bonus because there's a lot of them. The silk yogurt that Laura mentioned, the silk Greek yogurt, currently only comes in 2 flavors, vanilla and key lime. As of right now, there's like an odd shortage on the key lime, which is stupid. But like, it is the first yogurt, in my opinion, that does not taste like weird or like chalky or like it's got weird texture. It's actually got, it's pretty solid. So it's a huge win for folks that are either vegan or vegetarian that are having a tough time getting the protein in. That's for sure. All right, let's go to the next piece. So we talk protein, different foods that make sense. How much do people actually need when it comes to protein? Ignoring all of the labels and all of the things from a trusted, reputable source here, how much do people actually need when it comes to protein?
We're looking at kind of general daily requirements to meet your minimum needs, prevent protein deficiency essentially, right? Um, and this is a big area that I feel like can get confused and that I have heard gotten confused is that kind of the requirements we go on for general recommendations for the population is grams of protein on a per weight basis of an individual, like your average adult, right? So the recommendation that we have established right now, the daily requirement is 0.8 grams per kilogram of your body weight. That can change depending on like your current weight and things like that too. Um, but it's for the average adult that we give those recommendations. So again, these can always change a little bit and be different depending on your specific circumstances. But a lot of what I hear can be misinterpreted is that because we're in Canada and a lot of us go by pounds, that they might hear that recommendation and think it's zero point 0.8 grams per pound of body weight. So naturally, that would almost double the protein that you need to, or more than double the protein that you need to get in a day, right? Um, so it's really not anything too crazy compared to what I'm hearing out there nowadays. I have a lot of clients coming into that they've heard they need to get 2 grams of protein per pound of body weight too. And I think Ran, you might be able to elaborate on this. I think that comes from the fitness culture out there, and maybe for some very high performance athletes, that 2 grams per kilogram of body weight might be warranted. But for the large population, again, correct me if I'm wrong, who even is living a fairly active lifestyle, we just don't need that much by any means, right?
Yeah. And the thing to remember is that it's to the research that's been done on the 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram total body weight is done on a large amount of people that is trying to set the protein requirement at a level that will prevent deficiency or even insufficiency. And there is some research that's out there. Shout out to one of my favorite researchers, Stuart Phillips, who's a pretty strong protein researcher. He's suggested that it should be higher, not because of those reasons, because of avoiding deficiency and insufficiency is more for optimization. So there's that level, and then there's like what would be better for most people. And I mean, a lot of the folks that I work with are naturally more active, anyways. Uh, So my standard tends to become more so 1.2 as a low level, and of course there's going to be scenarios where it's difficult to even achieve that, and so as long as we're getting above the 0.8 grams per kilo, then you're in a really good place. But the research in the sports nutrition realm, for most folks, between 1.4 and 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram is a really good range. That, and where you are on that range, it may depend on the context. You know, how much, what are your energy needs, and how much protein can you get within that. That will not sacrifice other macronutrients, in particular carbohydrate. So for unit conversion, funny, which is where a lot of people get confused, like you mentioned, Laura, if we're talking about 2 grams of protein per pound, 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram is the equivalent of 1 gram per pound. So that would be double. That would be 4.4 grams of protein per kilogram, which for 95 plus percent of people is way too damn high. Like, it's just unnecessarily high. Yeah, just not. No, you're definitely going to be sacrificing some other element of your nutrition to achieve that level, whether you knew it or not. Yeah, that's definitely not. It's the fitness community for sure. Like, oh, I need to consume the level of protein that bodybuilders are hitting. Such specific niche cases that most people can't either reach, or it's not appropriate for. And let's be real, not everything that bodybuilders do needs to be like the standard for what to do. Like, let them do their thing, I think.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a bit of a disconnect that I hear, is that like, yeah, we hear people who are like bodybuilders or like really high performance fitness athletes, things like that. They do have these high protein intakes. And so sometimes I think there's that perception where if like, okay, if I eat like them, then I will get closer to them. But there is the instance where we need to kind of pair that with training to get the benefits of it too, right? So yeah, just defining like what makes sense for you individually does not make sense for another person as well.
Yeah, just because you're active and your protein requirements may be higher than the RDA's doesn't mean we need to get aim for like as much as possible. And in these, again, these, just using bodybuilders as an example, another reason why way more than what's normally recommended can still be beneficial for them is because they're having some additional enhancements there with performance enhancing drugs, where that's going to take more than what you would ever need if you're just trying to begin becoming active, or you're regularly active naturally as well. So we need to put all of that into consideration and know that, yeah, more protein is not always better. We don't need multiple grams per, or like several grams per pound of our own body weight. That would displace other important things in our diet, like those fats and like those carbohydrates that are also optimal for our health. It's not all just focusing in on one thing there, even if something like strength or hypertrophy is your goal. Carbohydrates are an important part of that. Fats are an important part of that for managing hormonal health, things like that. It's all part of a balance. That balance can be different based on your level of activity and your own individual requirements, but they're not insane like some online recommendations.
And just because more protein. Protein has a large role in building muscle, but that doesn't mean more is always necessary. Think of a house. If you're building a house, you have a bunch of workers building a brick house. If you just flood a team of 5 builders with like 20 tons of bricks, they're not going to build the house faster. It's not going to, this is not how it works. Obviously, an oversimplification. I just came up with it just right now.
If the builders of the house are eating 2 grams of protein per pound of body weight, then would they build it faster?
Yeah. Maybe. Maybe.
Yeah. Another group where I've heard those ridiculous recommendations is, and I'd say this often comes from fitness trainers, but working with people with obesity, where things like maintaining muscle efficiently, ensuring more of the loss is fat. That's where I've heard some of those more absurd recommendations where we're already taking something that's very challenging and just making it impossible by saying like you need to have like 250 grams of protein in addition to that, when really we really just need to start with moving towards getting in that routine of doing the physical activity, which in itself is hard enough, and then trying to make some gradual changes with our diet to support that too. We don't then need to add on just ridiculous protein targets on top of that and make things, make it seem like we're doing the wrong thing even when they're not.
Yeah, let's just make it markedly more complicated because some dude on the internet said so with not much evidence beyond trust me, bro. Sounds like a good idea.
Or people in person, like at the gym or trainers and such, not just online, unfortunately.
Good point. Good point. Yep. Um, okay. Well, I feel like we've sprinkled a lot of our approach into this episode, but I feel like I just want to make sure we highlight some of the takeaways and how we approach this with people. It's easy to poke fun at a lot of things in the food world and when it comes to marketing, but um, we just want to make sure we reiterate and focus on the things that make sense and how we approach it when we work with people, ignoring the noise and the like what is popular. I want to finish with that because ultimately that's what we care about and how we work on this type of thing with the humans that we work with. Maybe you could be one at some point, who knows. So who wants to walk us through what our approach is and then what some of the key takeaways are?
I can start with that one. So when it comes to evaluating trying to get more of something in our diet, whether it be protein, whether it be a different type of nutrient, first thing we need to consider is that thing missing in our diet? Where we should start is looking at our diet, seeing what is missing, and then deciding if we then need to take active efforts to get more of it. We're not working backwards from, like, I heard I need more protein. How am I going to do that? It's finding the need first. And then once we have found that there's that gap in our diet that is missing, we then need to think, what are some ways that I can go about trying to get this in the diet? Can I start by getting this with food potentially? Is this more of a matter of maybe small tweaks to my diet versus something that I can only get with a supplement or something that would take massive overhauls? Once that need has been identified and we've thought about different ways we can get it, we should aim for trying to get that from food first for a few reasons. One being that the food is going to be just more filling for ourselves. So rather than just a supplement in isolation, which if it's a micronutrient might be a pill, if it's a macronutrient might be like a powder or something. Once we've determined that, let's see if we can get it from food so that we're also getting extra nutrients, extra satiety from it. If there are then instances where maybe we cannot get that from food, which does happen, we may just not be able to have that much food in our stomachs. We may not have the appetite. It just might be very difficult and just not practical or intuitive for how we'll get that at this time. We can then look at some supplements that have that thing in it. And in evaluating that supplement choice, we'd be looking at things like, does this supplement have like just that thing that I need? Laura, maybe you can answer that instead, and then we'll save this recording.
Sure. Yeah, I think I can go over, kind of our approach with protein and, really any nutrient when we're looking at an individual person, right? We always want to assess, do we need more protein? Are we currently getting enough protein? If the answer is no, we're not getting enough, then we want to focus on usually with our philosophy, a food first approach. So going for some whole foods as they give you extra nutrients and vitamins, minerals, things like that, along with the protein. Maybe even some like healthy fats to satiate you as well. So it's not just the protein that we're really worried about when we see that you're not getting enough of that nutrient specifically. Going for food first approach, like the ones that we mentioned, supplements and those other protein products, they can definitely be a tool. They don't have to be essential, but yeah, I mean, it's something that comes up in conversation often with me and my clients. Sometimes we're dealing with very low appetite or significant issues with like actually eating food and getting that into our systems. So, if we need potentially a really concentrated dose of protein, maximize kind of on the space that you have in your belly or the appetite that you have, then yeah, sometimes these higher protein products can be really, really essential to make sure that you're meeting your needs. Um, so there's always a time and place for everything. But yeah, I think if we're already meeting our protein needs, we take that on a per person basis, and we ideally want to save you money. So let's not go for these higher protein labels just off the bat because we hear it's healthier. It's kind of on what specifically is most convenient and easy to incorporate into your lifestyle, and if you even need it or not, kind of thing.
I like it. I like it. If this is something that you haven't really explored before, well, hopefully you got something from this episode, but this is something we talk about with people nonstop. So any of the questions that could come up in your mind as you were listening / watching to this episode are fair questions, and we're always happy to work through them with you. Uh, Check out our website if you haven't already to learn more about us. If you feel like this is something that you want to work on, I have a lot of fun with this with people. As you could tell, I throw out analogies like talking about building brick houses and stuff. That's a lot of fun. Why not make it more fun? But perhaps next time you're in the grocery store, why don't you take a look at some of the products that are on the shelves and ask yourself if that was something that you were going to buy. Uh, do you actually need that now? Or is there another option that you feel like could work just as well that maybe just doesn't have a flashy label, but would serve its purpose in much the same way? Or if there's a food product that we didn't talk about that you think is really interesting that you either want us to look at or you think has a lot of value that people should have for whatever particular reason, we're always open to hearing about new ideas and new foods and things like that. So drop a comment for us to check out in the future. Well, we will wrap up the episode for now. Thank you so much for watching, listening, making it this far. We hope you enjoyed. Make sure to check out all the other episodes. We yeah, I can't remember what the next one is, but I'm sure Matthew will link it somewhere in the description box or as a card here. But for now, thank you so much for joining us. Enjoy the day wherever you are. We'll see you very, very soon.